Imagine, if you will, just the dust rising from a really dry, ancient plain. The tension in the air is, well, it's so thick you could practically cut it with a sword.
Oh, absolutely. You're standing right on the edge of Kurukshetra.
Right. Two massive ancient armies are assembled, just, facing each other down across this vast expanse of dirt. The destiny of an entire civilization hangs in the balance.
But I mean, the real story today isn't actually about the clash of steel or like the brilliant strategy of generals.
No, not at all. Or the politics of empires. It is about a single warrior. A warrior who, right at the precipice of all this violence, is about to experience a sudden catastrophic crisis of conscience, right in the middle of the battlefield.
And that breakdown, that total collapse of everything he thought he knew, is about to set the stage for one of the most profound philosophical conversations in human history.
It really is the ultimate dramatic setup.
You have everything on the line, the tension is at an absolute peak, and the hero he just stops.
And as we step onto that battlefield together today, a quick request for you, the listener joining us on this deep dive. Make sure to hit that subscribe button, like this video, and, share your own reflections in the comments as we unpack this.
Yeah, we really want to hear how this ancient, seemingly remote dilemma actually resonates with the battles you're facing in your own life today.
Because, honestly, the mechanics of human hesitation and despair, they haven't changed much in a few thousand years, have they?
Not at all. We still freeze up the exact same way.
Welcome, everyone, to today's deep dive into the source material. We are exploring the opening chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, but we're doing it through a very specific, incredibly illuminating lens.
Right, the legendary commentary of Adi Shankaracharya.
Exactly. Our mission today is to explore Chapter 1, which is known as Arjuna Vishada Yoga, or the Melancholy of Arjuna. We're going to explore how a total emotional and physical breakdown actually serves as the ultimate necessary setup for a spiritual awakening.
Because to understand the cure, we first have to thoroughly examine the disease.
That makes total sense.
Yeah, Chapter 1 is entirely dedicated to diagnosing the fundamental disease of the human condition. It's a prerequisite for all of the philosophy that follows.
So to really grasp the weight of this moment, I think we need to zoom out a bit. Because the Bhagavad Gita doesn't just exist in a vacuum, right? Floating around as a standalone philosophical text.
No, not at all. It's nestled right in the middle of a massive, sprawling epic, the Mahabharata.
And for those who might just be catching up to the lore, the Mahabharata is, at its core, the story of a devastating, generation-spanning family feud.
It's essentially the ultimate family drama.
Totally. We have the blind king, Dhritarashtra, who sits on the throne. Now, because he was born blind, he technically couldn't officially rule at first, so his brother Pandu stepped in to lead the kingdom.
Right, but Pandu dies young, leaving behind 5 sons, the Pandavas.
One of whom is our hero, the legendary archer Arjuna.
And this is where the geopolitical tension begins, because Dhritarashtra has his own sons, known as the Kauravas.
Led by the eldest, Duryodhana.
Yes, and Duryodhana is completely obsessively consumed by jealousy. I mean, he cannot stand the prosperity, the righteousness, or, frankly, the immense popularity of his cousins, the Pandavas.
He feels the throne belongs entirely to his branch of the family.
Exactly.
And Duryodhana isn't just going to sit around and complain, He resorts to some incredibly underhanded foul play.
Oh, it gets really dark.
Yeah. He invites the eldest Pandava brother, Yudhishthira, to a rigged game of dice. The dice are loaded, the game is a sham, and the Pandavas end up losing absolutely everything.
Their wealth, their kingdom, their freedom, everything.
As a result, they are banished to the forest for 12 brutal years, plus an additional 13th year where they must live entirely in hiding, incognito.
And the stipulation is vicious, right? If they are discovered even once during that 13th year, they have to do the entire exile all over again.
It's an agonizing ordeal designed to break them or just force them into an endless loop of banishment.
But they survive it. They endure the forest. They successfully hide for the final year. They fulfill their end of the bargain completely, and they return to claim their rightful half of the kingdom.
And Duryodhana, sitting comfortably on the throne he essentially stole, looks at them and says, no.
He literally says he won't give them enough land to cover the point of a needle.
Which is just so incredibly petty and arrogant. All diplomatic efforts completely fail. Even Krishna, who acts as an ambassador of peace and tries to negotiate a settlement to prevent bloodshed, even he cannot penetrate Duryodhana's greed.
So war becomes the absolute last, unavoidable option.
That is the long, painful, inevitable path that has led millions of men, elephants, and chariots to assemble on the field of Kurukshetra.
And what's remarkable about the source material we're examining is that it provides some fascinating historical grounding for this event.
Yeah, I wanted to get into that.
Because this isn't universally viewed as just a mythic story floating in the clouds.
Right, our sources go into significant detail about the timeline. I was actually surprised by the sheer breadth of the historical debate here. Like, when did this battle allegedly take place?
Well, according to traditional Indian astronomy,
Yeah.
specifically the tradition represented by the ancient mathematician and astronomer Aryabhata, the Kali Yuga era, began on February 18th, 31102 BC.
Wow.
And traditional accounts place this great battle shortly before that date. So we are talking over 5,000 years ago.
That is staggering, over 5 millennia. But not all historians agree with that specific date, right?
No, they don't. Other historians and astronomers analyzing different astronomical references within the Mahabharata itself, the positions of stars, eclipses, planetary alignments, they place the battle around 2449 BC.
Okay, still incredibly ancient.
Right. And then you have some modern historians who look at archaeological evidence and the development of iron weaponry, and they place the events much closer to 1400 BC.
So there is a massive window of debate ranging from 1400 BC all the way back to 3102 BC.
Exactly. But regardless of the exact year, there is actual, tangible historical evidence that the core figures of this story were recognized as historical entities very early on.
Yeah, the sources mention the Greek ambassador Megasthenes.
Right. He was writing way back in 320 BC while stationed in the court of Chandragupta Maurya.
And Megasthenes mentions that the people of the Mathura region worshipped Heracles, which scholars widely identify as Hare Krishna.
Yes, the historical roots run very deep. And even more critically for our understanding of the philosophy we are about to discuss, the linguistic evidence firmly establishes the Bhagavad Gita as a pre-Buddhistic text.
I really want to dig into this detail because it kind of blew my mind. Some later scholars have looked at the Gita, seen the word nirvana used 6 distinct times, and they immediately jump to a conclusion.
They say, aha, the Gita uses the word nirvana. The Buddha is famous for the concept of nirvana. Therefore, the Gita must have been written after Buddhism was established.
It's a really common assumption.
It is, but the linguistic context within the text proves the exact opposite. If you look closely at how the Gita uses the word, it's very distinct. In the Gita, the word nirvana is compounded.
Like attached to another word.
Exactly. For example, it appears as Brahma Nirvanam.
And what does that compound actually mean in practical terms?
It means absorption into Brahman, the ultimate universal reality. It is a state of absolute fullness, of merging with the divine consciousness.
Oh, okay.
It also appears as Nirvana Paramam, which translates to culminating in liberation. In the Hindu pre-Buddhistic context, nirvana is a supremely positive state of infinite existence.
So it's like a drop of water finally returning to the vast infinite ocean. It doesn't disappear, it becomes the ocean.
That's a perfect analogy, yes.
Yeah.
But later on, Buddhism took the word nirvana, which literally had roots meaning blowing out or extinguishing, and used it to mean exactly that.
Like blowing out a candle.
Right, an extinction of the self, a blowing out of the flame of existence and desire. It became concept of emptiness, rather than the Hindu concept of infinite fullness.
So the textual evidence strongly suggests the Buddhists borrowed the vocabulary from earlier, established Hindu literature like the Gita, and then adapted the meaning.
I mean, not the other way around, exactly.
Okay, so we are dealing with a text that is ancient, foundational, and just profoundly influential. Now, we mentioned at the start that we are looking at this opening chapter strictly through the lens of Adi Shankaracharya.
A fascinating lens to use.
Yeah. I think we need to set the table here for the listener. Who exactly is Shankaracharya, and why does his specific commentary change how we read this story?
Adi Shankaracharya was an 8th century Indian philosopher and theologian, and he is arguably the most monumental figure in consolidating the doctrine of Advaita Vedanta.
Let me stop you there, because Advaita Vedanta is a pretty heavy term. Advaita translates to non-dualism, right?
Yes, non-dualism.
But how would you explain non-dualism to someone who is, just trying to get through their morning commute while listening to this?
Let's use the ocean analogy you brought up a moment ago. We look out at the ocean, and we see thousands of individual waves. We name them, we watch them rise, we watch them crash and disappear.
Right.
From the perspective of the wave, it is an individual entity, born from the wind, destined to die on the shore. But from the perspective of the water itself, there are no waves. There is only the ocean.
Okay, I'm with you.
Advaita Vedanta asserts that there is only one ultimate reality, which is called Brahman.
The ocean.
Exactly. And the individual soul, the abbot on the wave,
Ah.
is fundamentally, structurally, entirely not different from that Brahman.
Wow.
The idea that we are separate, individual beings isolated from the universe and each other is just an illusion caused by ignorance.
Okay, that is a profound shift in perspective. So how does this apply to the Gita? Because, frankly, a lot of people read the Bhagavad Gita as a very practical manual for righteous action in the world.
They do. It's often summarized as, do your duty without attachment to the results.
Right, like a guide on how to be a good person, do your job well, and keep society functioning.
And that is a valid, very common interpretation. But Shankaracharya's commentary argues something much more radical.
What does he say?
He looks at the text and asserts that the ultimate goal of the Gita isn't just to make you a better, more dutiful participant in the world. The ultimate goal is complete liberation from the cycle of birth and death.
Breaking out of the matrix entirely.
Yes. And he argues forcefully that this liberation comes only through knowledge of the self, realizing you are the ocean, not the wave.
So it's not about learning how to play the game of life better. It's about realizing who you actually are so you can stop playing the game entirely.
Precisely. And crucially, Shankaracharya argues that this liberating knowledge is preceded by the renunciation of all worldly rights, duties, and attachments.
You have to let go.
You cannot hold on to your identity as a wave and simultaneously merge into the ocean.
Yeah.
You have to let go of the wave identity.
Which brings us directly to, like, a glaring question about the architecture of the book. Yeah, if the whole point of the Bhagavad Gita is this incredibly lofty, metaphysical, non-dual philosophy of the eternal self, why does the author spend an entire first chapter, over 40 verses of text, just describing armies, listing the names of generals, talking about blowing conches, and watching a guy have an emotional breakdown?
That seems like a detour, right?
It really does. Why is this narrative setup so crucial to a book about ultimate spiritual liberation?
Because philosophy is utterly useless unless it is applied to a real, agonizing human problem. Think about it. If the Gita just started with Krishna lecturing Arjuna on the nature of Brahman out of nowhere, it would just be a textbook. It would have no stakes.
Right. Krishna would just be that annoying guy at a party giving unprompted spiritual advice.
Exactly. Arjuna's inner conflict, his paralyzing doubt, his overwhelming grief, his total loss of identity on that battlefield is the absolute prerequisite for all the teachings that follow.
He needs to be broken first.
Krishna doesn't just start talking about metaphysics to a willing, comfortable student in an ashram. He is forced to speak because his dear friend is drowning in despair in the worst possible place at the worst possible time.
You can't offer a life-saving cure if the patient doesn't first realize in their bones that they are mortally sick.
Beautifully put. The breakdown is the canvas upon which the ultimate knowledge has to be painted.
So let's step onto that canvas. Let's walk through the gathering storm at Kurukshetra. The entire text of the Bhagavad Gita actually opens far away from the dirt and the noise, doesn't it?
Yes, it opens in a palace.
With the blind king, Dhritarashtra, sitting safely miles away from the battlefield, he asks his visionary advisor, Sanjaya, for a status report.
We look at verse 1. Dhritarashtra says, "O Sanjaya, what did my sons and Pandu's sons actually do when, eager for battle, they assembled on the sacred field, the Kurukshetra?"
It's such a simple, almost administrative question on the surface. Give me the sitrap.
But there's so much psychological baggage loaded into those few words.
Tell me about it. First of all, he specifically calls the battlefield Dharma, etc., the sacred field, or the field of Dharma, of righteousness.
And Shankaracharya's commentary zeroes right in on this. Kurukshetra wasn't just a random patch of dirt. It was traditionally a holy place, a place where sages had performed sacrifices to the gods for centuries.
Right.
By acknowledging it as a sacred field, Dhritarashtra is subtly revealing his own deep suppressed anxiety.
Because he knows, deep down, that his sons are the villains of this story.
Yes.
They are the aggressors. They stole the kingdom.
He is secretly terrified of the law of spiritual resonance. He is worried that the sacred, purifying energy of the battlefield might suddenly awaken a conscience in his vicious sons, inspiring them to repent and hand the kingdom back without a fight.
Oh, wow. I hadn't thought of that.
Or conversely, he fears that the righteous Pandavas will draw divine strength from the holy ground and absolutely crush his sons.
That's fascinating. He's afraid the dirt itself is going to take sides against him.
He really is.
And you can hear his own internal bias right there in the structure of his question. He says, "What did my sons and Pandu's sons do?"
Right. drawing a line.
Even though Pandu was his own brother, and the Pandavas are his nephews who he was legally and morally supposed to protect and raise as his own, he draws a hard dividing line. It's us versus them.
That phrase, mamaka in Sanskrit, meaning my people, is the root of the entire conflict. That lack of impartiality, that clinging to his immediate biological offspring at the expense of justice, is what caused the war.
And Shankaracharya points that out, right?
He does. Dhritarashtra is physically blind, yes. But Shankaracharya's commentary implies his physical blindness is just a manifestation of his total spiritual and moral blindness.
He literally cannot see past his own ego. So Sanjaya, who has been granted this kind of remote viewing divine vision to see and hear everything on the battlefield from afar, starts to describe the scene for the king.
And he focuses his camera, so to speak, first on King Duryodhana.
Duryodhana looks out at the massive, disciplined army of the Pandavas, and he immediately makes a beeline for his military teacher, Drona.
Notice the specific wording Sanjaya uses here. He says, "But then, seeing the army of the Pandavas, King Duryodhana approached the teacher."
That single word, "but," is doing a lot of heavy lifting.
It indicates that Duryodhana wasn't feeling the triumphant confidence he'd expect from a king with a massive army. He was struck by a sudden, cold fear.
I love how the source material unpacks his reaction because it is so incredibly human. I always picture this like a high-stakes modern corporate scenario.
Oh, do tell.
Imagine a ruthless, arrogant CEO. He's about to launch a massive, hostile takeover of a rival firm. He's been bragging about it for months.
Classic Duryodhana.
Right. But right before he signs the papers, he looks out the window at the rival company's headquarters. He sees their operations, and he suddenly realizes, oh, wow, they're way more organized, way better funded, and way more lethal than I thought.
But he's surrounded by his board of directors.
Exactly. He cannot let them know he's terrified, or they'll lose faith in him. So what does he do? He marches into the boardroom, puffs out his chest, and aggressively starts listing off all of his own assets to reassure himself, while subtly threatening his team to perform.
That is exactly the psychological maneuver Duryodhana is pulling here with his teacher, Drona.
It's all a bluff.
The psychological manipulation is brilliant. Duryodhana goes to Drona, who, it's important to note, was the martial arts guru who taught both the Kauravas and the Pandavas how to fight when they were young.
Right.
Duryodhana tries to subtly insult and goad him. He points to the enemy army and says, "Look at this vast army of the Pandavas, arrayed by your intelligent disciple, the son of Drupada."
He's twisting the knife. He's reminding Drona, hey, your own student, who, by the way, was prophesied to kill you one day, is leading the enemy against us right now.
You taught them all your tricks. I hope you aren't going to go soft on them because of some leftover affection.
It's pure paranoid manipulation.
And then Duryodhana starts naming the prominent enemy warriors. He lists these Maharatas, which translates to great chariot riders, warriors so skilled they're reputed to be able to fight 10,000 archers simultaneously.
That's a lot of archers.
He names Yudhana, Virata, Drupada. He's hyping up the threat, and then, abruptly, he pivots to his own side. He says, "But, O best among the Brahmanas, please be appraised of those who are foremost among us. I speak of them to you by way of example."
The commentary points out how genuinely audacious this is.
It really is.
He is talking to the supreme military commander, his revered teacher, yet he feels the compulsive need to list the commanders of his own army, as if Drona doesn't already know who is standing right next to him.
He names Bhishma, Karna, Kripa, and Drona himself. He's desperately trying to mask his rising terror by boasting, claiming his army is unlimited, while the Pandavas' army is merely limited.
Which is an interesting statement, because numerically it is factually true, right?
It is. Duryodhana has an enormous force of 11 divisions, while the Pandavas only have 7. He outnumbers them significantly.
But as we know, sheer numbers do not equate to psychological dominance or moral fortitude.
Duryodhana knows, deep in his gut, that his massive army is held together by political obligation, fear, and greed.
Whereas the smaller Pandava army is unified by a righteous cause and a shared sense of profound injustice.
Precisely.
And you can feel the tension just building and building as he rambles. It's getting awkward. Finally, Bhishma, who is the ancient, deeply respected grandfather of both factions and the commander-in-chief of Duryodhana's army, sees Duryodhana sweating and rambling.
So what does the old general do to break the tension?
He takes decisive action to cheer the boy up and snap him out of his panic. Bhishma lets out a massive lion roar and violently blows his conch shell.
It's the ancient equivalent of firing a flare gun or sounding the massive war horns in a movie.
And the moment Bhishma does this, the entire Kaurava army erupts. The dam breaks. Conches, kettle drums, tabors, trumpets, cow horns, all blaring at once in this deafening, tumultuous noise. They're trying to psych themselves up.
But the response from the other side is what truly shifts the momentum of the scene.
Across the field, Krishna and Arjuna are stationed in this magnificent glowing chariot drawn by white horses, and they respond to the Kaurava's noise by blowing their own divine conches.
And the sources actually take the time to name these specific conch shells, which is such a cool, meaningful detail. They aren't just blowing into random animal horns.
Yeah. Krishna blows Panchajanya, a conch made from the bone of a demon he defeated, which is metal.
Jerry.
Or Arjuna blows Devadatta, which literally translates to God-given, a conch she received from the heavens.
Bhima, the massively strong brother known for his terrible deeds and wolf-like appetite, blows a massive conch called Pondra.
Then King Yudhishthira blows Ananta Vijaya, meaning endless victory.
We have to ask why the text pauses to list these names. It's because the detail signifies excellence, divine backing, and profound history.
The Kaurava army just made a lot of chaotic noise. It was a cacophony born of nervous energy.
But the Pandavas' conches have names, they have histories, and they carry divine origins. Their sound is focused, purposeful, and terrifyingly clear.
And the text specifically tells us the psychological result of this response. That tremendous sound pierced the hearts of the associates of Dhritarashtra.
I love that contrast. The chaotic noise from the Kauravas didn't shake the Pandavas at all.
Not a bit.
But the unified divine sound of the Pandavas literally shattered the confidence of Duryodhana's men. It is the sound of inevitable justice coming for them.
So the stage is set, the weapons are drawn, the horns have sounded, the battle is literally seconds away from commencing. And here we arrive at an incredibly pivotal moment.
The first listening prompt for our audience today.
Yes, I want you, the listener, to pay close attention to exactly what Arjuna asks his charioteer to do right here. Arjuna turns to Krishna and makes a very specific, fateful request. He says, "O Asyuta, please place my chariot between both the armies until I survey these who stand intent on fighting."
A massively consequential choice.
Why is this spatial request so significant? Why does he want to be right in the middle, in the crossfire?
Because it is the ultimate physical representation of the psychological state he is about to enter. Think about the mindset of a soldier in formation. When you are deep within your own ranks, surrounded by your comrades, you are insulated.
You share the collective momentum, the shared anger, the groupthink of your army.
Exactly. You are a weapon.
You're just part of the machine.
Yes.
Yes.
But Arjuna doesn't just want to peek at the enemy line from the safety of his own trenches. He asks to be driven out and suspended directly between the two massive forces.
In that no man's land.
In that no man's land, he is abruptly stripped of that insulation. He separates himself from the collective mind of his army and steps into a space of absolute, terrifying isolation.
Wow.
By asking to go to the middle, he inadvertently steps out of his role as an active participant, a warrior, and becomes an observer. And as we will see, that shift into observation changes everything.
So let's follow that chariot into the middle. The wheels churn the dust, and the chariot pulls into the vast, empty space between millions of screaming men. Arjuna stands up and he looks out at the enemy forces, the men he is legally and morally obligated to slaughter.
But when that chariot actually stops in the middle of the noise, what does he actually see that triggers this collapse?
The text is very explicit about what his eyes focus on. It says, and this is our second listening prompt, it says, "Then Partha saw, marshaled among both the armies, uncles as also grandfathers, teachers, maternal uncles, brothers, sons, grandsons, as well as comrades and fathers-in-law and friends."
He doesn't see a faceless horde of soldiers in uniform.
No, he doesn't see the enemy as an abstract political concept. He sees his literal family tree standing in front of him holding spears.
He sees Drona, the teacher who held his hand and taught him how to string a bow.
He sees Bhishma, the grandfather who bounced him on his knee as a toddler. He sees his cousins, his childhood friends.
It causes a sudden, violent cognitive dissonance. He rode out to this field completely prepared to fight a righteous war against political usurpers. He had the moral high ground.
But in that liminal space between the armies, the political abstraction drops away entirely. The brutal, visceral, bloody reality of what this war actually means on a human level hits him like a physical blow.
And the reaction isn't just in his head.
No, it isn't just a quiet moment of regret. It is violently, overwhelmingly physical. The text details what happens to his body, and honestly, if you read this to a modern psychologist, it reads exactly like a textbook description of a severe panic attack.
Let's hear the symptoms.
Arjuna turns to Krishna and says, "Oh Krishna, seeing these relatives and friends who have assembled here with the intention of fighting, my limbs become languid and my mouth becomes completely dry, and there is trembling in my body and there is horripilation," which means goosebumps. "The Gandiva bow slips from the hand, and even the skin burns intensely. I am not able to stand firmly, and my mind seems to be whirling."
It's a complete physiological meltdown.
Let's pause on these physical symptoms, because I think anyone who has had a severe panic attack recognizes this immediately. The dry mouth, the dizziness, the burning skin.
Your nervous system gets entirely flooded. The fight or flight response short circuits because you can't fight your family and you can't flee your duty.
So your body just crashes.
Shankaracharya notes that this total physical collapse is indicative of his whole being, body, mind, and intellect, being violently affected by the unbearable thought of having to kill the people he loves and watching them be killed.
And the imagery of the slipping of the Gandiva, his legendary invincible bow, is deeply, profoundly symbolic.
This is the greatest archer in the world. That bow is an extension of his arm. But in this moment, his identity as the ultimate warrior is quite literally slipping through his fingers. He is losing his grip on who he thought he was.
But even as his body shuts down, his mind is still desperately trying to rationalize the freeze. He's panicking, but he's a highly educated philosophical prince, so he needs a logical reason for why he is suddenly terrified to do his job.
Yes. He begins to rapidly formulate complex moral and ethical arguments to justify his sudden overwhelming desire to run away.
He urgently needs a high-minded reason not to fight.
Exactly. So he starts building a formidable philosophical defense for pacifism on the fly.
And if we listen to his arguments, they sound incredibly noble at first. I mean, they sound flawless to our modern ears. He says to Krishna, "I do not see any good from killing my own people in battle. I do not hanker after victory, nor even a kingdom nor pleasures."
He argues, what need do we have of a kingdom or enjoyments? Those for whom we desire these things, our teachers, uncles, sons, are the very ones standing here risking their lives.
He is asking a fundamental question of utility, which makes perfect logical sense on the surface. What is the point of winning a glorious kingdom if the very people you want to share that victory with are the ones you have to step over, dead in the mud, to get it?
He says, even if I am killed, I do not want to kill these, even for the sake of a kingdom extending over the three worlds. What to speak of doing so for the earth?
It sounds like profound, enlightened compassion. He's rejecting worldly wealth for the sake of love.
But then he goes even deeper into the societal implications, right?
Yeah, he starts warning Krishna about the ultimate sin of destroying the family unit.
This is a crucial pivot in his logic, and we need to understand the traditional Vedic worldview he is citing here to make sense of it. Arjuna argues that from the ruin of the family unit, ancient traditional rights and duties are destroyed.
And when those traditions are destroyed, vice and lawlessness overpower the surviving family. This leads to the corruption of women, which leads to the intermingling of castes.
And in this ancient context, why is the intermingling of castes considered such an apocalyptic disaster?
Well, because in this specific Vedic framework, the social order is directly tied to the cosmic order. It's all about the ancestral offerings, the pinda, the rice balls, and water offered to the spirits of the dead.
It was believed that only specific, legitimate descendants performing specific, ritually pure actions could successfully feed the ancestors in the afterlife.
Arjuna is arguing that if the social order collapses and traditions are lost, these offerings will stop. And if the offerings stop, the ancestors will literally fall from heaven into hell, starving.
Wow. Okay, so he's basically outlining a domino effect of cosmic apocalypse.
He's telling Krishna, killing my cousins won't just win us a piece of land, it will unravel the moral fabric of the universe, destroy society, and send my grandfathers to hell.
It's a very heavy burden to put on one battle.
He concludes his rant by saying, "What a pity that we have resolved to commit a great sin by being eager to kill our own kith and kin out of greed for the pleasures of a kingdom. If the sons of Dhritarashtra armed with weapons kill me who am non-resistant and unarmed, that will be more beneficial to me."
He embraces martyrdom. He convinces himself that dying passively, sitting there and letting his cousins cut him down, is morally superior to fighting actively.
Which brings us to the culmination of this entire emotional arc, and this is our third listening prompt. After outlining this desperate apocalyptic logic, the chapter ends with verse 47.
What does it say?
Having said so, Arjuna, with a mind afflicted with sorrow, sat down on the chariot in the midst of the battle, casting aside the bow along with the arrows.
Just picture that.
The greatest warrior of his age, the man the entire army was relying on, literally sits down on the job. He quits, weeping, right in the middle of no man's land, with two armies staring at him.
And that is exactly where chapter 1 ends. With the hero utterly paralyzed, voluntarily disarmed, and weeping in despair.
Okay, so this brings us to a major crossroads in our deep dive today. Let's really look at this despair, because I have to push back hard here on behalf of myself and probably a lot of our listeners.
Go for it.
If I am reading this as a modern person, Arjuna sounds like the only sane guy on that entire battlefield.
From a certain perspective, yes.
You have millions of men ready to commit genocide over a border dispute and a bruised ego. Arjuna looks around at the madness and says, no. I refuse to participate in this slaughter. I choose peace. I choose my family over my greed. I would rather die myself than murder my own grandfather. Isn't that a definitively good thing? Isn't he showing incredible, evolved compassion and moral clarity in the face of barbaric violence? How can anyone argue that refusing to kill your family is a bad thing?
And that very instinct you're feeling, that desire to applaud Arjuna's pacifism, is exactly the genius of the Bhagavad Gita, and it's precisely where Shankaracharya's commentary is absolutely vital.
Oh.
Our modern humanist instinct is to view Arjuna as a tragic hero of peace. But the Advaita Vedanta diagnosis of Arjuna's state is radically different, and it challenges everything about how we view our own morality.
How so?
Shankaracharya argues quite firmly that Arjuna's despair is not true compassion, it is moha.
Moha, which translates to delusion.
Yes.
You and Shankaracharya are telling me that the guy who refuses to commit mass murder is the one who is deluded. Please explain the mechanics of that, because it sounds completely backwards.
To understand why it's delusion, we have to look much closer at why he is choosing not to kill them. Look at his language. Shankaracharya points out that Arjuna's sudden pacifism is rooted entirely in his ego. It is based on the erroneous, deeply ingrained belief of, I belong to these, they belong to me.
Oh, I see.
His grief is caused by the ideas of affection and parting that originate strictly from the self-identification with his relatives.
He kept saying, these are my grandfathers, my uncles, my teachers.
Exactly. Let's run a thought experiment. If the army across from him was made up entirely of strangers, faceless soldiers from a distant land who had committed the exact same crimes as Duryodhana, would Arjuna have dropped his bow?
No, he had fought countless battles before. He was a famous general. He would have wiped them out without a second thought.
Precisely. So his compassion is highly selective.
Yeah.
It is not a universal, enlightened love for all living beings. It is a desperate attachment to his own physical extensions, his family.
Oh, wow. That's a huge distinction.
It's like a brilliant surgeon who performs life-saving bloody operations on strangers every day without breaking a sweat, but who completely freezes and panics if they have to operate on their own child.
Because it's too personal.
Right. The skill hasn't vanished, the necessity of the surgery hasn't changed, but the overwhelming personal attachment clouds their vision entirely.
Because Arjuna's identity is strictly tied to his physical body and his earthly relationships, his wave identity rather than his ocean identity, his compassion is actually just a desperate clinging to his own egoic attachments.
That is an excellent way to synthesize it. And this brings us to the core conflict the text is wrestling with, the conflict of Dharma.
Dharma.
Yes, Dharma translates roughly to duty, righteousness, or the natural sustaining order of the universe. Everyone has a specific Dharma based on their nature and their role in society.
And Arjuna's Dharma is very specific.
It is. He is a Kshatriya, a warrior prince. His societal and cosmic duty is to wield weapons to protect the world from tyranny and uphold justice.
And Duryodhana is an objective tyrant who has broken the law, oppressed his people, and refused all peaceful resolutions.
Exactly. Therefore, the war is, by the rules of their society, legally and morally justified. It is a necessary surgery to save the body of the kingdom. But Arjuna's specific duty to perform that surgery is clashing violently with his emotional attachment to the cancer cells he is supposed to cut out.
Man, that's heavy. So he is confusing his personal anxieties and his emotional attachments with high-minded moral principles. He's using the sophisticated language of ethics. Destroying the family brings sin, to mask the simple, raw fact that he just doesn't want to do something that is emotionally excruciating.
Yes. Shankaracharya explains the mechanics of this psychological trap beautifully. He says that when an individual's discriminating insight, their ability to see reality clearly, is overwhelmed by sorrow and delusion, they inevitably abandon their own duties.
That makes perfect sense.
And not only do they abandon their own duties, but they often resort to prohibited actions or try to take on someone else's duty to escape their own. Look at what Arjuna does. He's a warrior, the commander of an army, but he's suddenly trying to act like a renunciate, a monk, saying he'll go live on alms in the forest.
Right, I'll just be a beggar. It's more peaceful. But he hasn't actually done the spiritual work to earn the right to be a monk. He hasn't mastered his own mind. He's just running away from a hard job and calling it enlightenment.
Precisely. And this is where Shankaracharya scales this specific battlefield moment into a universal truth. He views this entire first chapter as a metaphor for the human condition.
How so?
He identifies two core forces at play: grief, which is shoka in Sanskrit, and delusion, which is moha. Advaita Vedanta teaches that these dual forces are the mechanical engines of samsara, the unending cycle of births, deaths, and suffering.
How exactly do grief and delusion power that cycle?
Delusion, or moha, makes you believe that you are a separate physical body, fundamentally disconnected from the rest of the universe. It creates the illusion of I and mine.
So separation.
Right. Once you believe certain things or people are yours, you become attached to them. And because everything in the physical world is temporary and destined to die or change, that attachment inevitably leads to grief or shoka when you lose them, or fear of losing them.
The fear of loss drives everything.
Yes. This grief and fear drive you to perform actions, karma motivated by selfish desire or aversion, rather than selfless duty, and those karma-driven actions bind your soul to the physical world, forcing you to be reborn again and again to reap the consequences of your selfish actions.
So Arjuna's worldly reasoning, which sounds so noble and convincing to us at first glance, is actually the ultimate trap of human existence. It's the logic of the ego desperately trying to preserve its own illusion of separateness.
Yes, beautifully stated.
Man, that really hits hard. It completely turns our typical, everyday understanding of morality upside down. What feels like love is actually attachment. What feels like compassion is actually fear.
It's a very difficult pill to swallow.
Which brings us perfectly to the relevance of all this. Because the genius of the Gita isn't just that it dissects a guy in a chariot 5,000 years ago, it's that it holds up a mirror to us.
To all of us.
This is about you. Yes, you listening to this right now on your commute, or while doing the dishes, or sitting at your desk. How often do you confuse your personal attachments and anxieties with high-minded moral principles?
It's a deeply uncomfortable question to ask oneself, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because we do it constantly.
We really do.
How often do we avoid doing our actual duty-like real, having that incredibly difficult but necessary conversation with a spouse, making that hard ethical choice at work, setting a firm boundary with a toxic family member, because the emotional friction of doing the right thing feels too terrible to bear?
So instead of just admitting to ourselves that we are scared, we invent a complicated, supposedly virtuous moral justification for why we shouldn't take action.
Exactly.
We wrap our cowardice in the cloak of virtue. We say things like, I'm not avoiding the confrontation with my boss, I'm just preserving my inner peace. Or, I'm not quitting this difficult project because I lack discipline. I'm quitting because it doesn't align with my energy anymore.
Using therapy speak or spiritual language to justify running away from our Dharma.
In those moments, we are all Arjuna. We are all sitting down in the chariot, making up grand philosophical excuses for why we are dropping our weapons and refusing to fight the battles we are meant to fight.
And that, ultimately, is exactly why this massive breakdown is the perfect, necessary setup for spiritual awakening. Think about the alternative. If Arjuna had just been a little bit confused or just a little bit hesitant, Krishna might have just given him a quick pep talk.
Right. Win one for the Gipper. He might have patted him on the back and said, come on, buddy, you can do it. Think of the glory.
But a superficial pep talk doesn't cure deep systemic delusion. It just covers it up for a little while.
It's just a Band-Aid.
Exactly. By forcing Arjuna into that space between the armies, the battlefield strips him of his confidence, his weapons, his identity as an infallible warrior, and his entire moral worldview. It reduces him to absolute zero.
Yeah, there's a famous Zen Buddhist saying that applies beautifully here. Only a cup that is completely empty can be filled. If your cup is already full of your own opinions, excuses, and ego, you cannot receive new wisdom. It will just spill over the sides.
Arjuna's total intellectual and emotional failure is an absolute necessity. He has to reach the point where his own brilliant logic collapses underneath him.
He has to realize that his best thinking has led him to total paralysis.
Only then, when his cup is entirely empty, is he ready to become the perfect, receptive student for Krishna's ultimate teachings.
He has to hit rock bottom to look up. He has to realize the wave is crashing before he can understand the ocean.
Yes, and Shankaracharya emphasizes that the only true, lasting cure for this universal human despair, this paralyzing combination of moha and shoka, is the knowledge of the self.
Not better psychological coping mechanism?
No, not changing your external circumstances or running away to the forest, but realizing the transcendental reality that is beyond all earthly identities. To understand that you are the eternal Brahman beyond I and mine, beyond the physical body that kills and the physical body that is killed.
And that profound mind-bending shift from the physical to the metaphysical, from the fragile ego to the eternal self, is exactly what Krishna is about to initiate in the very next chapter.
It's going to be a fascinating turn.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into Arjuna Vishada Yoga, the core takeaway I want to leave you with is this. Arjuna's despair, his weeping, his total collapse in the dust, it is not a sign of weakness. It is the doorway to wisdom.
His breakdown is a massive breakthrough just waiting to happen.
It is the painful but absolutely necessary destruction of the false self to make way for the realization of the true self.
Absolutely.
If you found this exploration of the Bhagavad Gita's opening chapter as eye-opening and challenging as we did, please hit that subscribe button, like this video, and drop a comment below. We genuinely want to know, when have you experienced an Arjuna moment in your own life?
A moment where your entire worldview collapsed, where you felt completely paralyzed by conflicting duties, but it ultimately forced you to seek a deeper, truer understanding of yourself.
It's a messy, painful journey, but it is one we all have to take if we want to wake up. And speaking of that journey, you absolutely will not want to miss our next deep dive.
No, you won't.
We will be stepping right into Chapter 2, Sankhya Yoga. This is the moment where Krishna finally breaks his silence. And spoiler alert, he doesn't comfort Arjuna with platitudes. He begins to systematically, completely dismantle Arjuna's entire reality with the profound philosophy of the indestructible eternal self.
It is mind-bending stuff that turns our understanding of life and death inside out.
But until then, we want to leave you with one final provocative thought to mull over as you go about your day. If our moments of deepest, most agonizing moral confusion, the times we feel completely broken, paralyzed, and lost, are actually the exact prerequisites for profound spiritual awakening,
then how should you view the current, seemingly unresolvable conflicts in your own life today?
Exactly. Are those struggles just cruel roadblocks designed to torture you? Or are they the very things, the necessary pressures preparing you for your own liberation? Think about it. We'll see you next time.